Right now, we are being joined on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. He writes for The Athletic. He's been entrenched at Giants training camp. He was at the Giants versus Jets preseason game. And he also does a lot of college football work, a lot of FCS work as well. The one, the only Emory Hunt joins me and Hunter on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Emory, how you doing on this Wednesday?
I'm doing fine, man. I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you jumping on. So the first thing I want to touch on with you is, you have been entrenched at Giants camp. I want to know from you because, I think that the Giants are a team that's being overlooked a little bit right now in the NFC East because of what happened last year. This is a very interesting team this year because of the draft of Daniel Jones, because of the departure of Odell Beckham Jr., because of some of the good and bad things Gettleman has said over the last several months. What is the general perspective that you have right now on the Giants at this point in the preseason?
I think the offense still doesn't have the threatening playmakers on the perimeter. I think a lot of people understood that because of the loss of Odell Beckham Jr. So Saquon is going to be the guy that's going to be the focal point, and they're going to play complementary football in the passing game. But I think defensively, the Giants should be much better than what we saw last year, especially in the secondary. They've added guys that can take the ball away. You're going to have your growing pains because they're young rookies. And I'm talking about DeAndre Baker, Corey Ballantyne, and Julian Love. But the one thing that you can't coach is their ability to get their hands on the football, and they've done that. So, yes, the communication will be a work in progress, but when you combine the youthful talent along with veteran leadership like Janoris Jenkins or even Antoine Bethea or Michael Thomas, the secondary should be a strength. The pass rush should be a lot better with the improved play and growth in Lorenzo Carter, and I like what I've seen so far in camp from rookie O'Shane Zimenez out of Old Dominion. So I think with the second level and the third level being what they are, the defensive line should be solid as well, with Dexter Lawrence playing more of a pass rushing role as a 5-tech as opposed to a nose tackle. I think the defense will be a lot better than what people are giving it credit for.
Emory, what is the vibe around the team after seeing Daniel Jones for the first time? It's funny because if he does well, the argument is, it's only preseason. But if he does bad, it's, wow, he can't even do anything in preseason. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation.
Well, you're right, because if he does go out there this week against Chicago in extended period of time and doesn't perform well, then they'll quickly toss out what he did last week on his opening drive as an aberration. And if he goes out there and balls out, they'll continue to say, well, he's playing against the tools and he's playing with the tools himself, so you can't really read too much into it. I think for him, the biggest thing is to continue to stay steady at practice. Right now, he's looking to be capable of holding down the number 2 job, which now puts into play the Giants perhaps keeping only 2 QBs and maybe stashing a third one, probably Kyle Lauletta, on the practice squad. So as long as he's looking as if he can hold down a number 2 job, that's showing that he has made some good progress, because that's the reason why they had Alex Tanney in camp, just in case they were going to have to keep 3 quarterbacks. So I think he's played well enough or decent enough to where you can say, okay, they can trust him as their QB too.
Emory, you also cover the entire NFL as well as college football, and I wanted to get some of your perspective on the entire NFC East because you watch a lot of tape, you do a lot of analysis, and I want to get your perspective as someone who's not at Eagles camp about the Eagles and your perspective on them, because I think a lot of people, it's one thing to hear about the people who are on the ground entrenched talking about the Eagles, whereas you're not there at the facilities each and every day. So I want to get your a little bit of an outside looking in perspective on the Eagles. What do you think they can do this year in the NFC East, and what are your pros and cons when you're looking at them?
I think it's going to come down to the Eagles and Cowboys for the division. On paper, the Eagles look very good once again defensively. Their offensive line, they've added depth, which is always a great thing. So they're getting prepared to replace the older veterans on the roster. So they're in good shape there. The receiving core is what it is. They're stout at tight end. They're solid at the receiver position. Quarterback play will all hinge on whether or not Carson Wentz can stay healthy. The backfield, I'm still worried about. I know they brought in Jordan Howard and they drafted Miles Sanders out of Penn State, and they have a host of guys still on the roster, and Corey Clement, Wendell Smallwood, Donnell Pumphrey. I just still look at the backfield as needing a threat. And until that materializes, I think right now you're still looking at an offense that's going to be pass first, pass second. Hopefully they can be capable in the running game, but they still don't have that threat out there in the backfield. And to me, that's the lone weak spot, if you can call it a weak spot, on that Eagles football team. I think everywhere else, maybe the second level of linebackers you could have some concern about, but secondary, they played better on the back end of last season. I like what they have there. Defensive line is outstanding, the best defensive line, I believe, in the NFC. And so running back and maybe linebacker is where I have some concerns.
You mentioned the running backs. For those who don't know, you played running back at the collegiate level. So can you give the audience a little bit of a deeper look into what some of the things you're seeing with Jordan Howard, Miles Sanders? You mentioned Pumphrey, but there's also Wendell Smallwood, Corey Clement, Josh Adams. There's a lot of bodies right now in camp with those guys. So kind of give us a deeper look at the running backs. I think a lot of people here, they love Miles Sanders because he went to Penn State. They like Jordan Howard because he was on the Bears, and the Bears had a good year last year. People still have some positive feels about Corey Clement because he helped them win a Super Bowl. But give us a more of a critical look at these players. I think a lot of the talk about these guys has been mostly just positive, not enough critical talk.
Well, for me, it's about, who are you going to game plan for? And to me, if you're a threat, that's the type of guy that makes you worry about, oh, man, we have to be able to stop X, Y, and Z. Right now, Philly has a bunch of guys that I feel as though are complementary guys, which is not necessarily a bad thing. We've seen New England get by with this. We've seen the New Orleans Saints, to a certain extent, have some success with this, although they did have a guy in Mark Ingram that was a bona fide threat, in my opinion. And that allowed Alvin Kamara to do his thing as a multiple weapon. Right now, there's no bell cow or threat, so to speak. There's a bunch of guys that can do a lot of the same things. So Miles Sanders, Corey Clement, Smallwood, Sproles, all those guys can catch the ball out of the backfield, and they're very good receivers. Howard is more of your limited first down guy, maybe even second down guy, it depends. So is Josh Adams. So I don't see anyone here in this depth chart that is someone that you have to game plan for. They're the type of backs I feel as though are guys you can stop, and that kind of puts a lot of pressure on that passing game. And I know they can use a short pass to supplement the run, getting the ball to the guys of Nelson Aguilar, his hands quickly, and allowing him to do things after the catch. I get that. But as far as the backfield, I just worry about them not having a true threat at the position.
Emory Hunt joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan. It's FBallGamePlan. Writes for The Athletic. There's a lot of video work covering not just the NFL, but also college football. Emory, the other team you mentioned, the NFC East, the Dallas Cowboys. And there's a lot of talk going on right now. You got to pay Dak. You got to pay Zeke. You got to pay Amari. But who do you pay first, Emory? There's a lot of talk. You got to pay Zeke because people believe he's more important to the team. There's people who say, no, you got to pay the quarterback first because, the quarterback, that's what you build a team around. If you were advising Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, how do you think the Cowboys should handle paying all three of those guys?
They should find a way to pay all three. And if you have to put them in order, you have to pay Dak first because it seems like the quarterback market gets reset every other year. So getting a deal in place with Dak right now, a year from now, will potentially save you probably a good $10 million. But if the longer you wait, the higher that number is going to be because the market constantly gets reset. We just saw Kirk Cousins get paid on average, $28 million? And we know Kirk Cousins is not good at all. And so imagine what a guy like Dak Prescott, who's actually good and gets his team to the playoffs and has the most game-winning touchdown drives or game-winning drives in the league the last 3 years since he's been in the league. Imagine how much he would command on the open market. So if you're Dallas, knowing that the quarterback is the premium position and you really have to pay that guy, pay him now, and then that way you can get a good deal for him 2 years from now when that market gets reset again by another young and up-and-coming QB. So I would say pay Dak first, take care of Amari Cooper second, and then Zeke, because Zeke still has 2 years left on his deal. I get why he's doing it. He has a ton of leverage right now. But I think if you had to go in order, Prescott, Cooper, and then Zeke. Zeke is going to get his. I think all three will get taken care of before week 1 of the opening season. But I would go with Dak first because we've seen that quarterback market get reset every other year.
Paying all three definitely makes sense, but with someone like Jerry Jones, maybe I'm being a little biased because of Howie Roseman, but can you see him structuring these contracts correctly? Because I feel like Howie knows loopholes and things like that. I don't know if Jerry Jones has that type of mindset.
I think he can, because here's the thing. You can pay guys, and this is where Dallas doesn't get a lot of credit, or Jerry Jones doesn't get a lot of credit. You can pay those guys because you draft well. And as long as you're able to continue to draft well, you're going to always have good, young, cheap talent. And so the Cowboys over the last 3 seasons, let's say since 2013, they've drafted really well. And that right there, to me, helps them in this case. Think about it. Dak Prescott is a 4th-round pick. So they were able to draft Frederick in the 1st round, Martin in the 1st round, Tyron Smith in the 1st round. They got a starter in Connor Williams in round 2. They got Malik Collins, who's one of the better defensive tackles in the division, in the 3rd round. Sean Lee was a 2nd-round pick. Jalen Smith, they took a chance on, gambled on him in the 2nd round, got that correct. Jordan Lewis, Awuzie, 2nd and 3rd round picks respectively. Anthony Brown was a 6th-round pick, and Xavier Woods was a 5th-round pick. So as long as you're able to draft well, you're going to have money to spend. And that's the thing. They can't have a drop-off in the draft department. Otherwise, they'll be stressing to pay guys that they're going to let get out the door. Because if you're doing it the right way from a scouting perspective, on the front end, if you're doing your job as far as getting the right guys in and talented guys in, then you can absorb a loss of a talented player because, hey, we know we can draft a guy that's going to be equally as good with the potential to be even better, and we'll have him on a cheap contract.
How much faith do you have in this, what they're calling this new offense with Kellen Moore? Because I feel like it's all well and good that you change up the offensive staff. At the end of the day, my perspective is that Jason Garrett is still calling the shots down there. Usually if you have an offensive head coach, he's the final decision maker on the offensive play calling in many places in the NFL. So isn't Kellen Moore maybe more so a new voice than more so a new offense down in Dallas?
I think so, and a new voice can help him see things in a different light. We won't know for sure until the game starts to count for real. And one telltale sign for Kellen Moore having more of an influence is if we start to see Dak Prescott utilized a little bit more in a run game, because we know that can also help Zeke get off to a fantastic start to the season. Because when you have a guy like Dak or anyone that has mobility that's also involved in a running game, the running back is going to have gaping holes to run through. And when you combine that with the explosiveness of an Ezekiel Elliott, he's going to put up monster numbers. And, so we're going to see whether or not they utilize Dak Prescott's legs more so, especially in the red zone, or if they start to work, intermediate to deep as opposed to short to intermediate. And to be honest, Dak does a great job in the intermediate area. You want to see him just continue to get more confident in throwing the ball deep downfield, because intermediate, he's strong and probably one of the better intermediate passers in the game. So you're moving the football down the field in chunks with the intermediate passing game and also with the run game. And we'll see if they take more deep shots and also get Dak more involved in the run game. If they do so, you can say, okay, Kellen Moore definitely has had an impact on his offense.
Emory Hunt joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan as we do a look around the NFC East. Emory, we can't forget about the Redskins. They got a young new quarterback. I liked Haskins coming out of college. He had a really rough debut in the preseason. We know Case Keenum is there. We know Jay Gruden's fighting for his job. And what gets overlooked is that the Redskins were leading the division last year, but they had so many injuries, 20-plus guys on injured reserve by the end of the year. It just seemed like they never could get out of their own way. What is your perspective on the Redskins coming into this year, considering all the injuries they had last year, young quarterback this year, quarterback position in flux, and you have a head coach fighting for his job? There's a lot of pieces moving around down there.
Yeah, but you got to remember, too, that Redskins team, like you talked about, was one game away from the playoffs. They had a chance to play, had a play-in game, essentially, in Week 16, where they had to call a quarterback off the street, and Josh Johnson to help them win that game against Tennessee to get into the playoffs. So this is a very talented team. And like you said, they suffered a lot of injuries. I think they're going to be much improved offensively with Dwayne Haskins. Now you have the ability to throw deep down the field, which then will open up your run game and allow you to have success with both Adrian Peterson and Darius Geis, who comes back from injury. I think where people aren't talking about the Redskins enough is how great they'll be defensively. Their front seven is going to be phenomenal. And they have guys on the back end now, Landon Collins, Dominic Rogers-Smart, a veteran presence. But I think you see the growth of Fabian Moreau this year, Quentin Dunbar, and the two young guys that I really like in Jimmy Moreland, who's a rookie, and the guy in Danny Johnson once he gets off the PUP list. So I think their defense is going to be great. They're going to be able to run the ball like they were last year. A healthy offensive line should help things make things a lot easier for Dwayne Haskins, who's going to be the day one starter, in my opinion. And I think their biggest question is going to be left tackle. And if they can get adequate play from Christian or Donald Penn, whom they recently signed, or if they find someone that can step in. But I think all things being considered, a healthy Redskins team on both sides of the ball, a dangerous one in this division. I think they're a 9-1 team, but an outside chance to make the playoffs if they get a break or two during the regular season.
I know this is going to sound like an extreme comparison, but I know you will understand what I'm talking about when I say this. You know, there's a lot of people who reacted about Haskins because he had a difficult preseason and say, see, the Giants made the right decision. They picked the right guy, and Daniel Jones, look what he did, look what Haskins did. And I can't get out of my head, Emory. But 20 years ago now, when the headline in the newspapers was Ryan Leaf out-duels Peyton Manning in a preseason game. And all the hype was Ryan Leaf's the better quarterback in the preseason. Well, Ryan Leaf ended up being the bust. Peyton Manning goes on to have a Hall of Fame career. I'm not saying Jones and Haskins are on the same trajectory, but I think people are a little too quick to judge Haskins right now after one preseason game.
I'm old enough to remember people killed Cam Newton for his preseason performance. People killed Deshaun Watson for his first preseason game. People killed Lamar Jackson for his first preseason game. And they're hyping up Daniel Jones after one drive. And they took him out the game and then bring him back in because they wanted they were saying it was the weather and the long delay, but really they wanted him to leave on the high note and leave that impression in the minds of the fans. What you like about what the Redskins did with Haskins, you allowed him to keep playing through, allowed him to play through his completions, his great passes, his interceptions, his quarterback hits, allowed him to play through all of that so that way you have a lot to learn from. Daniel Jones has nothing to learn from because it was perfect for him in his one series against the Jets. So we'll learn a lot more about Daniel Jones, how he battles through adversity. And I think that's why you let Dwayne Haskins play throughout those mistakes, those ups and downs that we saw in week one against the Browns. There was a lot of good. There was a lot of bad. But that's why you let him play through and see how he responds to this second game. But make no mistakes about it. The Giants made the wrong decision at quarterback. It's just going to take time for it to play out. And, you know, if people are running victory laps after one series of a preseason game, then they have a problem.
Emory, before I let you go, and I always appreciate you jumping on here, Emory Hunt, follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan. You do write a lot about fantasy football for The Athletic. I know a lot of people, someone already sent a pretty basic fantasy question in earlier, which was pretty simple. I mean, you keep Damian Williams at this point, but he was asking if he should drop Damian Williams or Cooper Kupp at this point, which I thought was a pretty simple answer. But I want to ask you your perspective. You know, I was talking with somebody recently, and it feels like this is the kind of year where there's a lot of value in the running back position in fantasy football. So coming into this season, how are you looking at the running backs for fantasy football? Do you also feel there's a lot of value to be had at running back this year?
You always want to take the best players, and if you have guys that are game breakers, your Zekes, your Le'Veon Bells, your Saquon Barkleys, take those guys right away. Everyone else you can kind of just factor in. Maybe that's why these fantasy guys and analytics guys tend to think running backs don't matter. Great running backs matter. But the rest of the pack that are not game breakers, they're kind of interchangeable week to week. I would say the guy you should stash and grab right away is Mark Ingram, based off him playing with Lamar Jackson. I think he's in for a fantastic year running the football healthy-wise from a yards per attempt perspective. I think Mark Ingram is going to be a phenomenal back paired up with Lamar Jackson because of what he can do running the ball.
Emory, I know you've had a busy schedule covering the Giants, writing for The Athletic. You're preparing for the college football season. Always appreciate you jumping on the show and look forward to talking to you because football's back, man.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you guys having me on.